Welcome to Heels, Handbags, and Hustle. Step in faith, carry love, pursue God's calling. This is your host, Rachel Earp, and I'm so delighted that you found my show. My podcast is dedicated to encouraging women to be more bold, confident, and secure in their work and femininity. I've had the privilege of bringing on many outstanding women who share their journeys, stories, and successes with us. I believe women should embrace their God-given gifts and abilities without the entanglements of fear, comparison, or past mistakes. As a wife, business owner, and mom of 2 boys, one with Down syndrome, I have found such joy in the community of supportive women. My prayer is that this podcast elevates each person who listens and inspires a closer walk with God. Now, let's get to it, friends. Well, friends, I just want to welcome you to another episode of Heels, Handbags, and Hustle podcast. This is your host, Rachel Earp, and I'm really delighted that you have joined me for another episode today. I have a treat for you guys. I have the co-author, Kathryn Gordon, of a book called Relationship Grit, and I have the book right here. I've read this book, and after reading it, I just had this thought in my heart. And one of the things that I have really loved about this podcast, and I've always felt like it was more of a ministry than anything else, was being able to bring on other women who can really encourage and inspire us with their stories. And this story of a marriage between Jon and Kathryn Gordon and all of their success and raising children and building businesses and being able to pour into other couples and encourage them in their marriage, because marriage is hard, is so inspiring. And I'm just honored to be able to hear more in depth on the principles of relationship grit. And she's going to dive deeper into what that means. But I'm going to go ahead and just ask you, Kathryn, if you could introduce yourself and just kind of go a little bit into your story and what's your background. And I just want to thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on too, Rachel. This is going to be fun. So who am I? Although I was Navy, my dad was Navy. So I lived up and down the coast and went to 5 different elementary schools before landing back in Virginia Beach and staying there. And I wasn't very supervised. My father was gone a lot because he was military, and my mom was left with these 2 wild kids. And, my mom had a 7th grade education, and that's not the unfortunate part, but unfortunately she was left to care for these 3 kids. And, we kind of overruled her a lot, but, I ended up getting into trouble a lot also. I started smoking pot. I don't know why we ended up going here right away, but I felt like I need to share this. So I started smoking pot at the young age of 13. I would smoke pot every day at the bus stop. And by 16, I had met a guy, very, very handsome, good looking, charismatic guy who was also a cocaine dealer. And so I was doing cocaine. I ended up moving in with him because my parents were both alcoholics, and my dad, who is, by the way, he's passed away, was the love of my life, and I was the love of his life. And but unfortunately, when he drank alcohol, he wasn't a very pleasant person all the time. Me about something, and I jumped out the window and went to go stay the night with my boyfriend, and then moved in with him. So this whole time, Rachel, growing up in this violent alcoholic home, I kind of always knew that I wanted better in my life. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college, like you were saying about you. And so even through all the partying and the drug use, I always knew I needed to be better, and I needed to rise above this. And so it was probably high school, 11th grade, that I went to a guidance counselor and just shared everything about what I was doing, because I was literally bringing coke because I was living with my boyfriend in high school, right? I was bringing cocaine into the school, and I'd go to the bathroom and use. And again, on the outside, and this is what I got to tell people, you would never have looked at me and said she was a drug addict. You would have never looked at me. I was, by all means, I say this to say, like, everybody knew me. I was, I don't want to say popular because I don't mean it like that, but like, I wasn't just some druggie in the corner. I was, very much functioning. That's what I should say in school, but I definitely had a dark side. And I went to this counselor and I told her about what I was doing and about my home life. And I said, I want a better life. I want to go to college. And up to that point, my grades were awful. But I knew that I needed to make some changes. And I started making really good grades from that point on. It was a little too late to get my GPA up. I think I graduated, my GPA was like a 2.7 or so. It was something really low. And, but I did end up, going to college, and I started out going to community college because I needed to bring my grades up. And then I transferred over to a 4-year university, Old Dominion University, and graduated there. Now, I'd love to tell you that after I made those changes and I started going to college, that I lived this clean life, but unfortunately, I did not. I was pretty wild, and I was a commuter. So, I mean, I couldn't afford. Matter of fact, when I went to my father and told him I wanted to go to college, and again, I just need to say, my dad loved me more than anything. I mean, like, really, I was the apple of his eye. But, our parents do the best they can just with what they know, right? So in his mind, none of the people in his family ever went to college. And so when I went to him and I said, I'm going to college, and he said, no, you're not. You don't even know what you want, right? Like, isn't that a crazy thought to think, now? And so because I was so hard-headed, I'm like, oh, I'm going to college, right? So then it was something to prove. Yeah. And so it did take me 5 years because I started out in at a community college, but at time I was back and forth from living with this drug addict. He wasn't a drug addict, he was a drug dealer boyfriend, because it was so volatile. And then I'd move back in with my parents. And he would try to keep me from going to school, which is very interesting. And he would always say to me, like, you don't need to be doing that. Like, he definitely was not somebody who was lifting me up and wanting me to do good things. And then I discovered smoking cocaine, which was a whole other thing. And so I would sometimes, I was a bartender. I would bartend until 2 or 3 in the morning. And then I would go drive to the projects and sit around and smoke cocaine for days. And then I would go back to my regular life, clean up my act, make up all the college work that I hadn't done, talk to my professors. And this kind of went on all through my college career, which is really, really crazy for me to think about, because it was like I was straddling 2 lives. I had this life with the college kids, and, they were all my friends, and, we'd go to the college bars, whatever. But it was like I had this whole other life that, I was flying on Lear jets with, very wealthy people doing, the drug culture. The drug culture isn't just in the projects, right? It is also the very wealthy. So I was doing it all. But I ended up moving. I knew that I needed to change my ways, and it was really, really hard for me to do in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I literally took a job, a sales job, selling communication systems in Nashville, Tennessee, 2 weeks after I graduated from college. I literally packed it up. I drove like 900 and something miles to Nashville, and I never moved back. And so I was going to change my life. I was going to, do all the right things. And, I was going to change my life and get away from those people. Well, there's a saying, no matter where you go, there you are. Because guess what? I found those same people in Nashville, same things.
Right.
So I ended up going to rehab and a couple professional wrestlers. And I had dated this one professional wrestler on and off in between this guy, Rob, that I shouldn't have said his name, that I had lived with for years. And the professional wrestler was named Barry Windham. He was like one of the 4 horsemen. And so I would like fly off and, do these events. And so I ended up, moving to Nashville, still kind of seeing him, but seeing this other guy. So I ended up moving down to Atlanta, sober. And then I ended up relapsing. So segues into the relationship grip, by the way, which is what we're going to talk about. So I get down there, start partying again, hit rock bottom, and decide I'm going to change my life. And that's when I did change my life. And I really started seeking God, spiritual journey. I met this guy standing in front of a bar in Buckhead, Atlanta. And, the truth is if I hadn't done the work that I had done on myself and I hadn't cleaned up my life and I hadn't, I would have never even noticed him. He would have definitely not been my type, definitely not been, I wouldn't have given him the time of day, which I actually didn't give him the time of day for a while until I finally went out with him. And I was like, okay, it was such a God thing.
Wow, what a story. I really appreciate you sharing these pieces of your past so openly because, a lot of times people, they come into your life and they see who you are now and your accomplishments and, having it all together and a successful marriage and, you've raised children and you've just stepped into this role of mentorship for other people. And I think that so often people don't remember to consider everything that you have gone through to get where you are today. And when you're able to share the good and the bad, the ugly, the pain, the sorrow, the joy, like all of it in its entirety, that is what truly inspires other people to change because then they feel that they can relate. And while our past does not define us and God does not want us to dwell in our past, it's also so important to honor the things that have made us who we are and reflect on God's goodness and his faithfulness, that no matter what decisions we've made, where we were at, the choices and the wrong paths we were going down, it's amazing to see how when you look back, God had you the whole time. And now you're able to use these stories, even like today, being able to come on and share the stuff that you went through and the reasons why. There's going to be other people that this is going to mean the world to them because they feel like someone understands. So I just want to thank you for sharing this with us because it is an important part of your story. So I'm really excited to kind of dive deep into your book, Relationship Grip. And I know, I read the book and it was so beautiful to get to know both perspectives between your perspective and your husband, Jon's, and kind of telling this story together. I loved how you kind of broke up those different voices. That was very powerful. But I would really love also to know what inspired you guys to decide, hey, we're going to write this book together. Obviously, I'm sure the purpose of it, of course, was to be able to cultivate the different experiences and challenges that you guys went through in your marriage and be able to use them as a testimony and inspiration to others. But what was that pivotal moment where you guys just looked at each other and were like, okay, we're going to write a book on marriage? I would love for you to share more about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It had gotten to the point, it's very interesting. I would be at Target and I would run into a mom that I had known from the lacrosse field, or, I would run into a mom at the gym. and I didn't know them well, but for some reason, they would end up sharing with me stuff that was going on with their relationship about this. I was at the grocery store. And again, I'm like in the produce aisle, and this woman comes up to me and, shares with me that her and her husband have separated and they're headed for divorce. Then I'm standing there for an hour talking to this woman. And I don't remember exactly what the question was, but it was really along the lines of, why? Like, why do you think, or what's going on? Why are you guys splitting up? And she started sharing these different things that had been going on with her husband. And I said, did you ever tell him that you didn't like this? Did you ever? Because it wasn't an infidelity thing. It was more like, when he did, it was more things that were bothering her and causing her to question being in the relationship, that couples weren't communicating, like very simple things that could, be addressed or remedied. A lot of couples weren't actually talking. And so I finally realized, like, I think I just, I think we got to write a book on it. And I went home and I shared this with Jon. And again, it was kind of like what I told you, what had happened before we got on air. It was like, these things have been mulling, and then people start to say things to you and you realize, like, oh, okay. And that's when I realized, yeah, we need to write it. And Jon said, you know what, you're right. And a very interesting thing about that, after we wrote Relationship Grit, his brother read it. And, you have to remember, by then, Jon was a pretty well-known author in the, positivity, positive energy, leadership space. Yeah. And his brother read the book and he's like, you can't put this out there. Like, people are not going to think the same of you. And I have to give Jon all the credit. He said, no, I think it's really, really important. If we just write a book about, oh, look at us, here's our great marriage, here's what we do to be great. What is that? That's not real. We need to share. Here's what we went through. Here's all the things we went through. And here's what we did to get to the other side. And here's what you can do too. There was concern at first, like, wow, when someone finds out that you cheated on your wife, all of this. And again, that was it was like when we very first got married. I'm not making excuses for him. Trust me. No, but, but I think it is important because we're all growing. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be as fruitful. And it also requires emotional maturity. And, not everybody's emotionally mature. So these are things, again, these are things you can learn and the things you're thinking about. Here's something I found interesting. So this one woman at my gym, was coming to me and telling me a lot about what was going on with her marriage. But she was also very quick to make fun of her husband. She was very quick to cut him down. Her husband started losing weight, and she did not support that. She didn't support him. I definitely think we function from our wounds, so how were we raised? What was going on? But so I really look at that more as she wasn't emotionally mature. Just give him some words. Well, I'm not going to do that because he doesn't encourage me. I go, somebody's got to start. Mm-hmm. Why don't you just tell him how proud of him you are for putting in the effort to get healthy? She was probably on some level scared, right? Jealous almost, like, oh, wait, well, maybe he'll leave me. Maybe, he'll pull his whole life together and then he'll, do you know what I'm saying? Like, we all come from these places of insecurity and wounds, putting ourselves out there, and it's being more vulnerable. Listen, for her to be that person that started saying, I'm really proud of you. And believe me, at first she would tell me, he was kind of like, he kept looking like, what's the angle? Cause she used to be so sarcastic. But after a while, it's like a muscle. And the more she started doing it, he started doing it back. Like it felt like a safe space. The worst thing that can happen is it doesn't end up turning out the way you'd like it, that your relationship doesn't grow and it doesn't evolve. And unfortunately, it might be the demise of your relationship. And I really hope it's not the case.
Very true. And I think vulnerability and insecurities, that's something that, no marriage is perfect. And I dare say that probably I'm at least 99% of marriages. Maybe there's a 1% that can't relate, but most marriages, both people bring in the hurt, that fear, that insecurity. And while those are valid feelings, it's not an excuse for putting someone else down and not communicating what is the root cause of why you're behaving the way that you are and driving a wedge between you two. Wow, Kathryn, this is so good. There's so much that you have brought out in these, even just these past few minutes that are so impactful, because we do, we bring stuff into our marriage. There's the things that sometimes we don't even want to talk about or acknowledge or admit to our spouse that affect us and cause us to react certain ways. And it's so easy for us to, instead of being introspect, to blame and to kind of carry that and hold and cling to that. I hate to use the word baggage, but that's kind of what it is. It's like this baggage that we just cling to.
Life experiences. How about that? We all have them. Yeah. And that was the whole thing, is like, listen, we've been through it. I mean, we have been through it, and you can come out on the other side. And I am so grateful to God for many reasons, but that, we now see, we look back and think, wow, what if we had given up then?
Wow, what a story. I really appreciate you sharing these pieces of your past so openly, because, a lot of times people, they come into your life and they see who you are now and your accomplishments and, having it all together and a successful marriage. And, you've raised children and you've just stepped into this role of mentorship for other people. And I think that so often people don't remember to consider everything that you have gone through to get where you are today. And when you're able to share the good and the bad, the ugly, the pain, the sorrow, the joy, like all of it in its entirety, that is what truly inspires other people to change, because then they feel that they can relate. And while our past does not define us, and God does not want us to dwell in our past, it's also so important to honor the things that have made us who we are and reflect on God's goodness and his faithfulness, that no matter what decisions we've made, where we were at, the choices and the wrong paths we were going down, it's amazing to see how when you look back, God had you the whole time. And now you're able to use these stories, even like today, being able to come on and share the stuff that you went through and the reasons why. There's going to be other people that this is going to mean the world to them because they feel like someone understands. So I just want to thank you for sharing this with us, because it is an important part of your story.
For us, I will say that our foundation is definitely based in our faith. And that's why it was important for us to share these hard things we've gone through. Is, everybody likes to keep all these secrets. Well, if their husband drinks too much or their wife, I will tell you, I have been the one in our relationship to be a drinker, and Jon never liked it. I didn't drink when I met him. I was, living a very, very clean, healthy life. I like to say I traded tequila shots for green juice shots. About 34, and I had 2 kids. Jon was traveling all the time. We had just moved down to Florida, and my mailman put a bottle of wine in my mailbox to welcome me to the neighborhood. That bottle of wine hung out under my sink for a couple months until I thought, I'm just going to drink it. Well, I ended up going on like start drinking again, not like crazy. Of course, I was mothering and all that, but Jon didn't like it. And my girlfriends would say like, oh, well, that's who he married. And I go, actually, it's not. He didn't marry that. But my point is again, that was something we kind of had to navigate because, while I wasn't like, drunk in a corner or whatever, it was an issue that Jon would not like me to have that 3rd glass of wine at a party or a 3rd glass of wine at dinner. These are things, but a lot of times in relationships, nobody wants to talk about it. These are all like such taboo things. And so I like to share that. Like, he didn't like it. He made that clear. And by the way, I did not stop for him at all. But I did end up stopping. So I quit drinking in January, gaining a lot of weight. My adrenals were fatigued. It was affecting my lip. So for health, I mean, like I'm like feeling good again. So, but anyway, and I'm not saying you have to give up drinking. I'm just saying like, there's always skeletons in the closet and really address them. You'll also find out a lot of times you're not alone. Like a lot of other people are dealing with similar situations. Do you know what I mean? So that's why we ended up writing the book Relationship Grit. And if you want, we can go through the acronym.
I would love for you to go through the acronyms. That's what I would love to just kind of lead into next. That's perfect. I found that those were such a great way. It's short enough where you can remember, and I won't go into any detail because I know you're going to go through each one, but I thought it was very clever and very easy to remember, and also so meaningful and significant because each one represents such a powerful word and or phrase that you can easily apply. And I feel like it encompasses so beautifully all of the important elements of a successful, not just a successful marriage out of obligation or duty, but a thriving marriage that is blooming and full of love and excitement and, just a marriage that you cannot imagine getting out of. So definitely let's go there. Let's talk about the grit.
So it's grit, Grit, and the G stands for God. And as I said before, you have to bring God into your relationship. And I do know that not everybody has a strong spiritual foundation, and some people can get uncomfortable about that. Let's just be honest. I mean, I can tell sometimes when I'm talking to somebody and I bring that portion up, this glazed look goes over their eyes. And I say that not with judgment. I say that I understand they aren't on a spiritual journey yet. Because I feel like we all, but I think, it's so important to have that foundation. And, everybody's at different places spiritually. I always talk about when I met Jon. So Jon grew up Jewish, as I said, and I grew up Catholic, although I never went to church except for I went to mass on Christmas and Easter if my great aunt was in town. And then as a young adult, I did, start to have a spiritual life, but it was more like spiritual new agey. Jon also was more new agey. That's when we met. That's what we actually connected on initially. Well, I really feel like Jesus pursued him, but became a Christian. And then he started to bring that into our home and really educate, like, even me being a Christian growing up, I really didn't know the Bible. And he brought those stories to life and those teachings. And so I say, bring God into your relationship and, however that looks for you, because, it really kind of gives you a spiritual foundation. And I'll share more about that in the next one. But so I kind of talked early on before we talked about this, about my husband cheating on me when we first got married. Fast forward 14 years later. I don't know anything about this. You must know. Like, apparently he did this. I didn't know about it. But I'm out to lunch with some friends. And Jon at this point is traveling all the time. And, I've got 2 kids. They're now middle schoolish. One of my girlfriends starts telling me she's got a boyfriend. She's married, by the way. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then my other girlfriend tells me that her and her husband are getting a divorce. Now, I have to tell you, this couple that were getting a divorce, we played tennis with them. They were like the couple that were always having public displays of affection. They were the couple that, we'd literally start to switch sides, after we won or lost a game, and they had to kiss. That wasn't Jon and I were kind of like, oh God, here we go. I had not really felt connected to Jon. He had been traveling a lot. We weren't in a bad place. It wasn't a time, and we've had many bad places before then, just fighting and everything. Was going to leave him one time before because I was really sick. So we won't even go into that right now. But again, I had no idea about this early, marriage tryst. But and so I'm distraught. Like, Jon comes home. We weren't feeling connected, and so we took a walk on the beach. We're walking on the beach, and I'm like, oh my gosh, so-and-so and so-and-so, they're getting a divorce. Can you believe it? And I was really looking for him, probably like more to comfort me. He stops dead in his tracks, turns in the sand, looks at me and says, I have something to tell you. And my heart dropped. And he said, when we first got married, I cheated on you. I didn't like full blown have intercourse, but like, I cheated on you. I was like, what? Okay, Rachel, I just got to tell you something. I told you a little bit about my past, right? I was like the party girl. I'm not saying I was out but I was the one that was like, I was the model, and I was the, always, in bikinis. I was, you cheated on me. Yeah. I was blown away, and I was devastated, and I was leaving him. And he's very simple. He's an amazing human, but he's very simple thinking, and is like, well, I just really thought it was so long ago. And it was, I'm like, so I was going to leave. And so Jon was on a plane, as he worked so hard to try and get me back. Jon was on a plane, and, well, I'm actually going to tell you that in the next one. That's R. So the first letter was G, bring God into your relationship. So the next letter is R. And Jon, well, hold on. I'm sorry, Rachel. I need to tell you what the G is for God. And that Jon was on a plane and starts pouring his heart out to this guy on the plane, saying, oh my gosh, my wife's going to leave me. This happened when I first got married. And the man says, you know what? He didn't know the man, by the way. Something similar happened in my marriage. I came up with a prayer, and that's a prayer that my wife and I say. And I think you need to come up with a prayer.
Oh my goodness. Yes. The prayer. Oh, this is such a sweet part of the book. I'm so excited.
And so that's when Jon came up with this prayer. And it's also in my book. I know you've read it, but I can share it with you now. And we added on a little part for our kids, but I'll tell you what that is, because I don't think that's in the book. Okay. It's God. We invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us, so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. Okay. So Jon Gordon's saying this prayer nonstop. I want nothing to do with him. So we're going to segue into the R for resolve, because here we were on our way to divorcing, and Jon has resolved to fight for our marriage and have us stay together. And he was leaving notes all over the house. Like there would be all these little notes, like in front of the coffee machine. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. I'd get into my car. I love you more. You know, like, I mean, all over the place. He was leaving these, and he didn't stop. And I got to give him a lot of credit. Because he really could have gotten, you know, discouraged and gave up, but he never did. And so one night, and he would say that prayer that I just shared with you every single night. Didn't matter if he was traveling, he would call. I didn't want to talk to him. He would say, tell the kids, put me on speaker. Now the kids didn't really know what was going on at this point. Put me on speaker. And he would say the prayer out loud. Well, after a while, I kind of started to memorize the prayer, but I wasn't about to say it out loud, right? I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. And so, you know, we'd be laying in bed. He'd always try to grab my hand. I would not let him. So one night, he starts saying the prayer. And for whatever reason, I reached over and I grabbed his hand and I started saying the prayer with him. That was the resolve. Like, he never gave up. And I want to share something because I think it's important to share this part too. And I don't know how I'm going to really get this out. I probably should just do a post on it. But one of the things he did was, at any moment, because you remember my trust had been broken, I might ask him to see his cell phone. I'm not proud of that. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, right? It probably wasn't. But I had such trust issues with him that I needed it. I needed to see, like, what are you doing? Who are you texting? What's going on? No matter how many times, he would just hand it over. And that started to build trust, because the phone is a really, really big deal, you know? And I don't think many people talk about it. So he resolved to stay in to work on our marriage, to fight for our marriage. So the G is for God, the R is for resolve, and the I is for invest. You have to invest in your relationship. You can't just expect things are going to be great. Well, it's not like, oh, okay, I want to be fit. It's like, no, I got to plan out my meals. I got to go grocery shopping. I got to prepare my meals. I got to go to the gym. I got to get my steps in. These are all things that you're investing in a relationship. It doesn't just happen. You have to invest. That says couples who invest small amounts of time or make small sacrifices in the relationship are 85% more likely to stay together. It's quality over quantity, right? My husband is a writer. You know, he's written 28 books. And so he writes all the time. In my room, you know, maybe I'm cleaning out drawers, whatever I'm doing, I'm busy. And I'll hear, honey. And I know he wants me to walk into his office, sit down in his chair and read. He does a weekly newsletter every single week. He's been doing it for 21 years and do all that. And so just little increments. And so that's the invest part. You have to do it together.
Yeah.
You have to both want it. And when I say that, I don't want it to be that you think, oh, well, he's got to give 50% and I got to give 50% and sit there and point the finger at each other, because that's not what I mean. It just means that you both want the relationship, and there are going to be times in the relationship where you're giving 100% and they're not giving anything. Right? You know that you're supporting each other and you're doing it together. It's, you know, you got to remember that you're on the same team. I also like to say the T could stand for team. You're not on separate teams, because when you're on separate teams, what? You keep score and you both lose. So it's not about that. You can't go, well, he's not doing that, I'm not going to do it. No, be the first one to do it. Or just know that there's going to be an ebb and flow. I mean, in our own relationship, I can tell you countless stories like that. And that builds trust. Again, you know, right? It's kind of the same thing with, oh, give him a compliment. Well, I don't want to give him a compliment. He doesn't compliment me. Give him a compliment. So, but again, do it together. And remember, you're on the same team. And, in my book, I got to say this, you kind of brought it up early on when you first started talking, this is not just a book for couples that are just getting married, although that's amazing. It's not just for couples who are fighting. It can be there's a lot of good tips and ideas in here just to strengthen your marriage. I ended up getting a letter from this woman. I need to see if I can find it. I'm going to read it to you real quick because I get this letter. If I can find it real quick, I'm going to read it because I want to get the real, hold on. I may not be able to find it. Oh, I got it. Okay. So I get this letter in the mail. It's in all bold letters. And the letter reads, it's from Sherry Chait. And she says, once I started the book, I couldn't put it down, but it did take me 2 evenings to finish it. I realized I was in a terrible mood yesterday, and I acted out on Jerry today. After a lovely breakfast, I told him I was going to serve him all day. He looked at me like I was crazy, and he didn't know what I was talking about. Kathryn, I must compliment you both on revealing such intimate stories. I can certainly relate in most cases. Your book resonates with love, care, and commitment, and it'll be helping the many, many people who read it. We celebrated our 68th wedding anniversary on March 6th. I turned 88 on September 22nd, and we celebrated Jerry's 90th birthday on July 5th. We are truly blessed, and we started saying your prayer when we go to bed at the same time each night. Love, Sherry.
Oh my goodness, that is so precious. I love that you were able to share that. And I can't imagine what that meant to hear such a powerful result of your guys' book and your testimony. And I just love everything about this.
Doesn't matter where you are in your relationship, you can always improve. You can always, use some of the tools. And I say, if you're not in a relationship, this is a great book to read.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because this book truly is such a powerful tool, not just for people who already are married, but for people who are looking for the right qualities in a marriage to prepare themselves, to prepare their hearts, to prepare their season, to expect good things from marriage. Because I feel like this day and age, with all of the unsuccessful marriages and the horror stories, the people that go into it for all of the wrong reasons, that it's a deterrent to people who actually do have that desire for a good, healthy, and godly marriage, that they're scared, that they're afraid, and that they almost don't even believe that it's possible.
Many tools that you can use when you move in to a relationship, especially, like me, I had a lot of very volatile, unhealthy relationships, right? And so I wish I'd had that book when I was, probably would have prevented Jon and I from going through the ups and downs, but then of course we wouldn't have read. So, but yes, so that is Relationship Grit, GRIT.
Oh my goodness. I love this. I love these acronyms. I love the word, even the meaning of grit, which is the word that you guys chose and that was very significant to you in writing this book. And I'm sure that this word was something that was your mantra even before this book came into the world. But if you even look at the meaning of what grit means on its own, it is courage and resolve, strength of character. And just thinking about having grit in your marriage, and then the acronyms. And I love that you guys started out with God first, like the G in grit standing for God, because without God, if you remove God from the equation, it's just, that's like the secret sauce, as they say. God is what is the glue that holds everything together, because God created the institute of marriage. He created it to be holy. He created it to be sacred and beautiful. He even describes our, like, being married and the sanctity of marriage, and relates it to Jesus, his son, returning for the bride of Christ, which is us, which is his children. So that tells you that marriage is important to God, that he wants us to have thriving and successful marriages, that he wants us to enjoy our marriage, that it shouldn't be an obligation, that it shouldn't feel like a drudgery or a duty, or I'm together with my spouse because I have to be, or because we've been together for so long. It shouldn't be that way. And I'm just so grateful that you guys put this book together. And not only that, but you're going and you do speaking events, that you're out doing like this, coming onto the podcast and sharing this and the depth of your guys' personal story and how it relates to this book, because it's going to have such a powerful impact. And even that letter that I know I mentioned this earlier, and you know, just that letter that you got from, here it was, a couple, you know, that in that age and season of life, still saying that is just so beautiful to see. And I love that. So one of my favorite, this was just a little nugget that I took from your book, was it's in chapter 3 in the invest part, but at the very beginning, you have this little quote here, and it says, I'm going to read it. It says, to have a great relationship, you can't act like you are two separate teams. You must invest time and energy to become one team who supports and encourages each other. And when I read that, and I know you kind of touched on this earlier when you were talking about the invest part, but I think that's very significant and important to just kind of bring back to the surface again. And I really just want to pause and let those words sink in, because it is one team. And I've talked to a lot of, you know, and not even just me talking to people, but I hear stories, you know, where people are talking about their marriage and it becomes a big comparison thing. And they're not on the same team, rooting for each other, going the same direction, heading towards the same goal. It's almost like they're just two separate people on their own path, going two different directions. And even God says that how can two walk together if they don't agree? You know, unity is extremely important. And God talks about unity a lot, because when we're not unified, we're not strong. And that's where we can become easily broken. And I just loved that quote and just wanted to share that. That's one of the many just beautiful parts of this book that I wanted to bring to light. It kind of ties into that, and I think that's why that invest part hit me so much. And that little quote that I just shared was when my husband and I, we made it through our 10-year anniversary. And shortly after that, my husband was battling with an extreme case of anxiety and PTSD, where his entire world came crashing in around him. And he's a very private person. I dare say there was maybe only a couple people besides myself who even knew that he was going through this battle, that his world was crumbling around him. And that was a very difficult time in our marriage, because this man that I have so relied upon, that was always so strong, that was happy-go-lucky, that very rarely let anything get him down in life, was all of a sudden every day down on the floor in our bedroom, hardly able to even get up out of bed, wasn't able to drive. Everything triggered him. The smallest things would just trigger him, and he would go into full-blown panic attacks that would take sometimes an hour, if not longer, just to get back to somewhat normal. And at first it came on and we thought it was just a coincidence, and then they became more frequent, and there started to become where there was no relief for him. And, during that time in our marriage, yeah, that it kind of ties into that comparison and that time where sometimes people think, well, I'm giving 75% and you're only giving 25%. And here I was feeling like I was giving so much more during that time because he wasn't capable of actually doing that, 50-50 thing. And it's really it's not about that. And I realized at that time that was a completely false expectation and that was unrealistic and selfish to think that I should, while he is going through this, expect him, hey, by the way, did you take out the trash? It's so selfish. And yeah, while all of this was going on, I remember having moments where I thought, this is not what I signed up for. This is not my Dale. This is a different person. He became a different person. He was very easily agitated. He wasn't happy. He was broken. And that's why those vows are so significant because, in the good and the bad, it's easy to have a great marriage when everything's going great, when your life is perfect and you're in a high place in your life. But when you're in those low areas, and sometimes we're not both going through it together. He was battling this on his own. He was coming to grips with things that had happened in his past that just all came to a head. He was dealing with people who were dragging him down daily, who were negative and just influencing him and just draining his soul. And it was hard and it broke my heart. And, those are the times that it's so easy for the temptation to arise where, hey, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out, but that's not what marriage is all about. And this, here we've made it through, we've come out on the other side, and God, that's a whole story, a miraculous story in itself. But those are the times that we have to hold strong. And that's when love is not just so much an emotion, but it's really a choice, and it's honoring and, staying with that choice that we make.
Love what you just said. And I think we need to point this out. I want to bring it up again. You just shared. There were times when you would think, this is not what I signed up for. This is not who I married. It doesn't mean we're not going to think and feel those things. Yeah. But then it's about how you address them. So thank you for sharing that, because people even say to me like, oh, you always supported him. And yes, I did, but I wasn't always happy about it. There were definitely times in our life together where I was like, hello, and I would have to go, it's not like I was an angel running around, fluttering my wings like, oh, no. Right. Yeah. And that's why I think it doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't mean you're not a great wife or a great husband. You're human and, still continuing through. And it sounds like you guys are now on the other side.
I'm even going to say something else and kind of tying into that too very quickly. But I think marriage needs to be more of a priority for people. We put so many other things in front of our marriage. Maybe you're raising children and, your life, your children become the priority. And I'm not saying that our children are not important and there needs to be times where they're a priority. But our marriage is, when you're not working together as a team and there's a disconnect and your marriage is failing and your marriage is suffering and hurting, then it's very difficult to be a good parent in those situations. There's times where we put activities and work and business and, friendships and things that, being on our phones, zoning out on our phones, spending more time on other things that really in the grand scheme of things don't really matter. And then meanwhile, our marriage is on the back burner. The heat has gone out. And then all of a sudden you have this epiphany and you realize, wow, I don't know this person anymore. And that's a very sad place to be in. And it happens all the time. And it's so easy. I'm not saying it's not easy for that to happen. But that's why it takes a concerted effort to make marriage a priority. And that's very important too. I just want to commend you and Jon for doing stuff that you didn't have to do, like putting this book together, going through some hard, remembering and reflecting on some difficult times in your marriage, and being able to openly share about them, because it matters more that people can be impacted for good, that this could change a life, that this could change a marriage. That heart and desire truly shines through in this book. And I've sent it to a lot of different people as well, because I truly have felt so impacted myself in your guys' story and what you have come through. And I could talk to you all day, Kathryn, because I love just how genuine you are. You are truly the real deal. You're so real and so relatable. And I just want to thank you so much for being that way, for being yourself and true to that. But before we kind of tie this episode up put a bow on everything, what are some last words that you could say to that couple that they're in that hard place? They're weary, they're discouraged, that maybe they've already given up, or they're thinking about giving up. And maybe there's hurt. Maybe there's no longer that trust. Maybe that confidence is broken. Maybe their spirits are crushed. Whatever it is, what are some last words that you would give to that couple?
And I'm going to say, are you communicating? Are you communicating what's going on, or what led you all to this point? And so a very simple thing that you all can do is ask each other, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do I connect? How well do I communicate? I'm sorry. How well do I communicate? And what would make it a 10? Some things, maybe some you don't like, but you're going to start to hear some things on each side that you might do. And, like, I was a great communicator, and I don't say that like, oh, I think so. Sometimes women are, not always, but that wasn't my issue. I have other issues, trust me. But, Jon wasn't a good communicator. So I had to figure out, and for Jon, the one thing I knew is that he does not want to talk when he's hungry. Like, I realized, duh, is I would give him something to eat, or he would get something to eat. And, now when we had our kids and they were younger, it was harder to just take off and take a walk. But, oh my gosh, walking for us, and I got to tell you a funny story. Sometimes those walks, we fight. Like, ways by the end of the walk, we kind of got through it. So, I mean, that right there, I think, is a really, really, good thing. As a matter of fact, if you go to my website, I just thought about this, and I never really even tell people about this. I have some free PDFs, like downloads. One of them is a gratitude journal. So it's 4 prompts that you and your partner can do at night before bed, to just start to communicate, to start to connect. And actually, I don't know if you got this. If you didn't, you need to make sure you get it yourself, Rachel. But if you buy the book, Relationship Grit, and you go to relationshipgritbook.com and you enter in, like, I don't know if it's a code or your payment proof or whatever, I have a free action guide. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you, I really should make this into a course. Had somebody go through and come up with this whole action plan, and it's free. It's free. And I mean, it's about like this thick if you actually printed it out, but like, it'll take you through everything. So I have a lot of resources. They're on my website. You can always reach out to me at hello@kathrynforreal.com. My website is kathrynforreal.com, and I'm on Instagram at Kathryn Gordon. Yeah. And then Facebook is Kathryn Carol Gordon. And then I have a page, but I don't really go on there. So yeah.
I love it. And I love all the ways that you show up, Kathryn. And your podcast, I just have to say, I love your podcast. It's called Kathryn for Real.
My podcast, Kathryn for Real. Yes.
I have enjoyed these episodes that you bring because I know that you choose the people that you bring on with great purpose and care to talk about things that are not just important to you, but that many different people who are listening can relate to. And I've just found it to be such a delight because I love how your personality just really shines through in those episodes.
Thank you. You are such a delight. I'm so glad to meet you. And thank you for your patience. I know it's been like going again, but I'm so glad we finally got to do this and we got to connect.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am just so grateful that we were able to get this to work out. I know your schedule has been crazy. This season has been crazy for you. And I'm so blessed by our friendship, and you're just absolutely a delight. You're so inspiring, Kathryn. And I just want to thank you for taking this time to reflect, to share, to encourage and inspire everyone who's listening. And I know they will be so touched and enriched as much as I am. So thank you for doing this with me. This has been so much fun. This has been an amazing conversation. And it's just, I just can't wait to release it and for everybody to be able to listen. And I'll make sure to link all of those in the show notes so that people can follow you too, like I have, and get to know you more that way. But yes, this has been so good. I just adore you. And I just want to say, everyone, definitely go get this book, Relationship Grit with Jon and Kathryn Gordon. You will be so inspired. You'll be so touched. And if you have listened to this whole episode by now and haven't already gone and ordered it, well, I just don't know what to tell you. But reach out to me, of course, if maybe it's just difficult for you to get books right now, whatever. I'll be glad to send you a copy. And I just want to thank you all for listening, for taking time out of your day to check out this episode. And if you didn't already know Kathryn Gordon, you do now, and I'm sure that you are just like me and you adore her as well. I would encourage you to just take this all in, to let it sink into your heart. I hope this has been a time of receiving for you, that whatever you've been doing, whatever is going on in your life, that you're not alone, that there are people that support you and are praying for you. And I just let not your heart be troubled, and don't give up. Well, friends, I just want to thank you for listening today. And if this show has meant something to you, please leave a review or rating on whatever platform you're listening to. Also, make sure you follow the show. This helps me continue bringing episodes like this where women can share their stories and link arms together. I hope you feel inspired and refreshed. Now get out there and hustle, girlfriends.